Hey everyone, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia. Every weekend we drop deep dive interviews with leading guitarists and guitar figures. And midweek we have our iconic albums series, which you have tuned in for. Thank you so much for joining me. Now today, Rob, Gabor and I check out No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom album from the 90s. Such a great record featuring the wonderful guitar playing of Mr. Tom Dumont. Today's episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott. Now, Joe is not only a fantastic guitar player, he draws on his years of experience as the ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and also at the McNally Smith Music College. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
You're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player. Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
All right, everyone, welcome to Iconic Albums, episode 11. I'm joined by my friends Gabor, Josika.
Hey, hello.
And Rob Rhodes.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you guys here for another iconic record. We're up to number 11. Rob, it's up to you this week. Kick us off.
All right, this week I have chosen No Doubt's third studio record, Tragic Kingdom. Now, I was driving home from maybe one of the last gigs that I did a couple of weekends ago, and I decided to put this on, and I'd forgotten how great it was. I really wanted, and it seems a theme in the next couple of episodes, but I really wanted the girls to represent on this show a little bit. So No Doubt was a really no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
So it was released on October 10, 1995, and it was recorded in 11 different studios between March 93 and October 95. So it took 2 years to record, basically. There were 7 singles released off this record between 95 and 98. So this album was 3 years in, charting.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was a huge album.
And in that time, it sold, up till now, it sold more than 16 million copies. But interesting enough, when I went back just in the United States from 93, 94, 95, it never featured in any of the top selling albums. So it just showed how much of a slow build it was, first of all, and then how it just continued to sell and move. The tour for this album lasted 2.5 years. So you can see where the touring led to TV appearances, album sales, and just they did it old school, not something you can do these days. No. They were signed by Interscope Records, which again, Jimmy Iovine, 1991, and they released their debut album in 92. So they weren't overnight successes, but it did seem at the time that they just sort of jumped out of nowhere, and Gwen was this fresh face. But they'd been together for 3 albums already. This album was produced by Matt Wilder, which some might know. I'm going to do a little fun fact early on. He was the singer-songwriter of the 80s hit Break My Stride.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, that was his claim to fame. It took over a year for this album to hit number 1. So released, as I said, October 95, but it took until December 96 to reach number 1 on the Billboard charts. And then once it hit number 1, it stayed there for 9 weeks straight. And you think about that year, I looked at the albums that were around at that time, 95. It was, Mariah Carey's and all, like the biggest pop stars of the time.
Okay.
So that's kind of the summation of that. When you had a listen, Gabor, what came to mind about 1995?
1995. Oh, wow. That was a long time ago. Well, I hadn't listened to that album, I reckon, in a good 20 years or so. And I listened to it. I have a CD version of it somewhere. I haven't been able to find it, but I do have it on CD. What a great album. Like, just pretty much all the songs. And I think I never quite realized at the time how good the production is.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic production. And the amount of sounds that are on that. And I think, to me, 95 especially, or not 95, but sort of late 90s, Gwen Stefani really, I think she sort of opened the door for this whole kind of 50s pin-up girl revival thing that's become quite big. And it's sort of, the whole ska 50s look, There's so many other bands that followed, but she kind of opened the door in that and sort of started and having and what a front person, woman, front person, whatever you want to call her. Just awesome. So I killer album. I think it's killer. And for the time, if you think, like you're saying, what's in the charts, the variety of sounds are on this, and the variety of styles that are on this, I think that's quite. At the time, I didn't realize it as much as I do now in sort of hindsight, but I think very ahead of its time.
Absolutely. How about you, Matt? 95. Where were you, and what did this album do for you at the time?
Man, this album was a big deal for me, actually. At the time, 95, sort of mid-20s. So I'm writing and playing a lot. I was in some bands. So I was writing heaps of ska stuff, influenced by these guys. And, I mean, the ska of the 90s was huge. You had the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Real Big Fish, Five Iron Frenzy. I think in Australia, the Porkers, who'd been going for a long time, they got a bit of extra coverage. The wheel finally turned for them. I think they'd been doing this stuff for ages. But it was a big deal. I saw them. I'm not sure if they toured Australia off this album, but when the next album came out, I think Rocksteady, they toured on that.
Is that the purple hair phase? Was it the?
Not yet. I think that was her solo
it later,
career.
Purple hair phase? Okay.
Because I saw them at the Horden in 2000. So was that on that tour? Or that was the next record?
Yeah, that's when I saw them.
Yeah, so that was 2 records after that, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. We might have been there on the same night, Rob.
More than likely.
I think they only had one show.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Killer show, man.
Oh.
Yeah,
I was only disappointed by the mix. I'm not going to sit and whine about that. It's going to become my thing, complaining about mixes.
I can't remember.
Especially at the new Horden Pavilion. The old Horden used to sound awesome. But I've seen a bunch of shows at the new one, and none of them really cut the mustard.
I love that show though. I can't remember the mix.
Yeah. I just wanted more of Gwen's vocals, but anyway, that's just me.
There was probably heaps of Tom Dumont's guitar, so I was probably okay.
Yeah, and it does depend where you are in that room.
Yes.
Where it sounds good, but
yeah. And I was in the mosh pit. I was sort of going off. It was probably my last hurrah in the mosh pit.
So you were you gigging at that time and playing any of the songs live?
Just a Girl ended up being a cover band staple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that riff's harder to play than it looks, by the way. To do it cleanly.
The little keyboard riff, the little ba-da-da-da.
Yeah.
To actually play it properly in there is quite difficult, actually.
Yeah.
And trying to step on a flanger as you're doing it.
It's the guitar and the synth together sounds great on that. So.
Yeah, it sounds really good together.
So that was the tune I guess I was bumping into. But I was doing originals bands at the time with a girl singer. Actually, girl singer Jane Denham, who's a really big deal in country rock music in Australia.
Okay.
She's a rocker from way back. So that the band we were kind of putting together at the time was very much inspired by this stuff. And I love the whole guitar approach, everything, man.
Yeah, it sounded fresh but familiar. Because if you're into the Specials or Madness, you're obviously in the popular music scene through the 80s. You would have heard all that sort of stuff, and there was, but you immediately was drawn to it because it sounded familiar, but there was something very original about how they did it and how they incorporated their own like California thing into the whole thing. So yeah, they grew up in Anaheim in California, and the name of the band no doubt came from a former member of the band's favorite saying was just no doubt. He just used to say no doubt to everything. So they decided to call the band that. And then
9-9, isn't that
Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Yeah.
No doubt.
And then Tragic Kingdom, the name came from one of their former teachers. That was the nickname for Disneyland, which is where they lived. Disneyland's in Anaheim, California. So they used to call it Tragic Kingdom. I think it was also when No Doubt dropped, and I could be wrong because it just could have just been my perspective of things, but all of a sudden, every band that I went and saw or I was a part of somehow dropped a reggae groove into the middle of a rock song.
Right.
And I feel like the proliferation of that was the popularity of No Doubt. And because even within their songs, they did that a bit. They would have a driving rocker and then go halftime and do that reggae,
do the reggae
thing.
The ska reggae feel,
Funny story that Gwen's brother Eric was in the band at the time of recording. So he's the keyboardist at this time. And prior to this record, he'd done all of the songwriting, which is maybe why the two records before this weren't hits. So the producer and the record company were encouraging the other members of the band to start writing, and he kind of got his nose out of joint and walked away before the record was finished. So very similar to Mark Knopfler's brother leaving Dire Straits right before they became the biggest band in the world.
David Knopfler.
David, that's right.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a lot of stories like that.
If you look at the journey to get the record done, though, like when you were saying all the timeline, I thought, oh, man, no wonder Eric had enough.
Yeah, and it started because the producer and the record company executives, they remixed Just a Girl and released it as a single, from what I was reading, and then they really liked it. So they basically went back and remixed every other song the same way. And so that's why it sort of took a long time. And Just a Girl wasn't a hit on the first release. So it stalled on the charts when Don't Speak came out.
Okay.
So it really never got its thing. So they actually did a re-release of Just a Girl after Don't Speak went ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
And made it a hit. And a second, well, it wasn't a hit the first time, but it made it a hit because they decided to re-release it. Which has happened to a lot of songs in the past.
Yeah.
Favorite tracks, Matt?
I mean, Just a Girl is pop magic. It's great. But my absolute favourites, because they're a bit more scary, are Spiderwebs and Sunday Morning.
Yeah.
I love that. When you talk about that halftime, I love that stuff. The first time that really stuck out to me was... what was the bit? Smash Mouth. They did a cover of Why Can't We Be Friends? And they did it with this
war song, yeah.
Yeah, the war song, but they did it with this full scary halftime intro with the horns and everything. And I just love that sound. So those two tunes totally stuck out. And yeah, I love the horns, but just then the massive guitars. What's the Spiderwebs? Yeah, the harmonics in Spiderwebs are cool.
Yeah.
So in the verse, but also in the chorus, he's doing the power chords, but he's like kind of working his way down the string, getting all the notes.
They're cool. They're very cool.
Yeah, man. I love Tom Dumont because he was a bit dorky as well. I thought I can relate to him more. And whereas the bass player, Tony Canal, was super cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand. But the dorkier guitar player, I don't know if he was dorky at all, but
he just seemed like that typical California skater guy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but a little bit too tall, because he came
really
off quite tall next to the other two.
Yeah, definitely down the front. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember a Guitar World interview with him, and he said there's a couple of, he tipped his hat a couple of times to Eddie on that record because he was in metal bands prior to joining.
Oh, really?
No Doubt.
Wow.
Yeah, and so yeah, it was a bit of a tip, that spider webs with the pinched harmonics, and then there's a tapping solo later on on the record.
Yeah.
I always love that sort of red orangey Hamer, like Destroyer kind of thing. That I think it's is it in Sunday Morning? I think it's in Sunday. No, Don't Speak. In Don't Speak, he's playing it at the start. I think. I remember always wanting, going, I want one of those.
Oh, he was just like Hamer City, man.
Hamer City, yeah.
And that gig, Rob, do you remember? Like, he had all of them out, man.
Yeah, he was. He definitely was into the Hamers by that point. And we'll get onto that stuff later on, what he was using at this time. But so while we're on that, Gabor, what were your standout tracks?
There's so many. I wrote down quite a lot of them, actually. Spiderwebs again, the halftime ska thing, Just a Girl. Different People, there was another one that very Madness reminiscent.
Yeah.
And I wrote down, there's great, there's this one bit where the guitar is hard pan to the right and the bass is hard pan to the left.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool, like the way it works out. And there's this little horn parts in that I absolutely loved. Hey You with the sitar thing in it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's just because it's so, and there's this sort of, then it goes into this kind of Baroque harpsichord thing in the middle. Actually, that's one of the things I wrote down right at the start. They are great at writing bridges. All their bridges are excellent.
I know, it's one of the hardest things to do too, isn't it?
Which is always hard, but I found in almost every song, when you go into the bridge, I kind of go, oh, that's cool. Hang on, what's another one I wrote down? Oh, Tragic Kingdom, the very last song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's that's like almost like a concept album kind of tune.
Oh, man, the
and
riffs.
then it sort of sneaks into 6/8 at the end as well, which is really cool. And then that little Star Wars outro.
Yeah, yes. I made a note of that too. See who listened to the end. So that was going to be a test.
Right to the end. So they're the ones I wrote down. The intro to You Can Do It, I wrote down very 70s cop show disco kind of vibe. It's that sort of with the wah guitar and stuff.
I wrote down Shaft approved wah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I wrote down Shaft approved wah.
Shaft approved, yeah. It would definitely be Shaft approved, yeah. So tons. And The Climb, that's another one. With that Mellotron, very sort of Strawberry Fields-esque. But even the guitar has like a Leslie kind of sound on it.
Yeah, that intro with the slow Leslie where you can hear that dirt from the... From it. It sounds
very
great.
kind of Beatle-esque, Strawberry Fields-esque.
Yeah.
Hey, we've mentioned Mellotrons a few times. Can I just quiz you guys? When you play a Mellotron, do you have to play... Is that the only way they work?
It records a tape, right, loop of what you're doing. Is that what the Mellotron does?
So Mellotron is... It's like a keyboard, and each key has basically like a tape reel attached to it.
Yeah.
And it has it's a certain length. I don't know how long it is, but it basically is a certain length of it's like a sampler. It's a sampled part of a note of whatever it is at that certain length. And you can only play for certain lengths, so you can't hold notes for long. So I guess that's why it's always that.
Yeah.
It's short notes because otherwise you get to the end and then it actually rewinds and then. Yeah.
The Don't Speak, the electric guitar part in Don't Speak has got that kind of approach as well. That dinkle, dinkle.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and I think there's also something you don't hear very often in a song. Ended on this. Is that an electric 12-string guitar, which is something you don't hear often in kind of punky sky kind of song.
Yeah, because there doesn't seem to be space in the instrumentation for something for that to shine through.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a cool, the whole album. I was really surprised how much I liked it, listening to it all again, and how I've just forgotten about half of it because it was for a while. I listened to it a lot, and it was a big album, and we played a few songs. This is probably more in the late 90s, early 2000s. We played a few songs off that album in bands and duos and stuff like that. But killer album.
Yeah, for me, Spiderwebs, because it was the first time I'd heard and seen, no doubt. And I just went, this is a ridiculously good, like, what the hell's going on? And Gwen was so different to anything else at the time.
Yeah.
You know, she had the Hindi kind of thing on her forehead, the third eye thing going on. And like she was wearing knitted like tennis singlets and like weird, like it was so cool. But it was definitely
and
that sneakers. Yeah. That California oversized pant vibe with a tiny little top. But she was a front woman. Like she moved like no one's business.
Yeah.
She was
jumping around. She had her signature moves. It was like nothing no other front person at the time was doing.
And full energy, like as in 110% all the way through. Yeah.
I like the pinched harmonic thing in Spiderwebs as well because it was a gateway, you know, into that different style of music from what I'd been listening to in the mid-90s, which was still like the Van Halens and Extremes and Bon Jovi. So the pinched harmonic thing was a gateway. I particularly love in Spiderwebs the slide guitar that slides up into the chorus.
So
Good. It's just one of those moments you want to just replay over and over again.
Yeah. Hey, I watched them do that on Letterman, which was a great, iconic performance.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Stefani jumps on Letterman's desk and the band's just going off. But he's using a slide for that. I think he used his mic stand.
Okay.
No, that's
that's
I would
a cool thing to do.
I do that all the time.
I guess if you're on national TV to millions of people, you want to just try and be a little accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the gig,
it's more
anyway.
It's
Sorry, man, I jumped in on that slide thing, but
it's all about
cool.
the show, baby. The thing that stands out is at Spiderwebs as well, the sheer amount of groove changes. Like in a pop song, you know, you go from the drums are slamming. And then all of a sudden it's a halftime and then it's a reggae groove and you just like, you wouldn't get that today. And it's just what you were saying, they do bridges really well and all of those things get changed up. Sunday Morning was the other standout for me, similar to you, Gabor. The harmonies, like, every time I hear those, and that was one song that we used to perform all the time. I had a cover band in Sydney for 12 years called Singled Out. And it was named Singled Out because we were just overplaying the big hits. So we always played the second single. So we're all kind of over singles. So we always played Sunday Morning instead of Just a Girl. Okay. And I love the drum sound in Sunday Morning as well. You can just hear how much they were playing the hell out of everything. Like the drums, you can tell he was hitting it hard. Like there's no... BDF or Easy Drummer 2 that can replicate that kind of
totally
like human feel.
And I mean when you see footage of him live, he's quite an energetic drummer. Yeah,
absolutely.
So,
the standout I picked out in The Climb, that Leslie sound in the intro too, and the Mellotron and the tapping solo in Tragic Kingdom. I just remember that from that interview that he that was his little tipping of the hat to Eddie.
That's a really synthy kind of guitar sound as well, hey?
I actually wrote
really
down, is that a tapping solo or is that a synth? Yeah. I actually wrote that,
And that You Can Do It is really the only song that I feel didn't fit on the record because it was so different. It was like right at the end, they maybe heard Jamiroquai and went, ooh, let's do something like that because it does have that 70s disco thing going on, but it's still
the intro. The intro, I just love the intro. It's just sort of the first I don't know 30 seconds, 40 seconds of the song, and then it dragged on a bit to me. That song that was maybe one of the songs that sort of wasn't quite the same, but the first 30, 40 seconds are just killer. That intro,
and that just when you hear horns, man, it's so good.
Well, I think that was one of the things I really like about this. It's the way the horns, the guitar, and the keys interact, and the bass too. It's very interactive, all the instruments.
Yeah,
and it's really well done. Really, really well done.
Absolutely.
End on this. Is it End on this? There's a tune with really cool unison riffs. It's Tragic Kingdom I'm thinking of. The guitar and bass just riffing out those big fat riffs together sounds massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, maybe we should take a break, Matt, and then we can come back and talk about gear.
This episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott, ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and the McNally Smith College of Music. I was one of the beta testers for the course and can say as a music educator, I was really impressed by the logical sequence of learning. The course has also been endorsed by players such as Brett Garson and Greg Kopp. For more details, check out the links in our show notes. All right, welcome back. We are here talking iconic albums with Gabor and Rob, and the album we're talking about tonight is Tragic Kingdom by...
No doubt.
No doubt. Thanks, Rob.
No
You
doubt.
seemed a little doubtful.
I was a little doubtful. I don't know why.
All right, let's talk about gear on this
Let's.
record and on the tours. So Tom has a website and he has a photo area where he's got some shots from the studio this time and the live tour.
Nice.
And it's really interesting to see his pedal board, which was about, let's say, 50 centimeters by about 40 centimeters. And in the middle of it, there was just a wah and another pedal, which I think was a Phase 90. And that was it. There's nothing else on the pedal board. So it was all this empty space and these two things in the foam. It was hilarious. But for the recording, he said he didn't have a lot of money at the time and he didn't have the best gear. So the label gave him a budget to rent like a whole bunch of gear for the sessions. So he was using a rented 60s Gibson SG with P90s. And that was his major guitar on all of the tracks.
Oh, wow.
Through a Matchless Clubman 35.
Oh, nice.
He also had a Fender Music Master 2, which he still has to this day. He also, I think maybe after the sessions, he picked up a 78 Ibanez Flying V, which was his main guitar. It was like a natural with the black guard.
That's in a bunch of videos here. You can see that in a few videos.
Yeah, and he gave it away. He gave it to a young guitar player named Mason Young. So, but he was an adopted middle child. And he said his life changed when he heard Kiss's Destroyer.
Wow.
And that was he heard that at his aunt's place, Aunt Ruth, and she gave him an old 12-string guitar. And he remembers early on just learning Rush songs. So he was just playing Rush stuff and the metal bands and stuff. But he was into Rush, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and progressive rock such as Kansas and Yes. So you can kind of hear a little bit of that, maybe from what we were talking about before, the song construction and the songwriting and the sophisticated bridges and all that sort of thing. There was that craft there that they had. And we talked about it before, his Hamers. So he really liked that 50s space age design, but it still had that 80s metal thing that he was into. So the Explorer thing, he ended up with the Hamers. So it was the Hamer Vector E or Vector Ed. That was the name of that model. So that was the Explorer. And then the Carina Explorer and Carina Flying V, which were the Hamer standards. And that was pretty much him for most of the time. And the Phase 90.
Cool.
But yeah, he's a big Matchless guy there for a long time. So that's that bright Vox, chiminess that you can hear.
Yeah, right.
From all his guitar. And I think you guys might have a view on this of that guitar. It kind of had to be mixed that way when you've got horns and you've got that snare drum sound and the keyboards. Like, where was the guitar going to sit in the
totally.
mix?
Much smaller space to sit in, yeah.
Oh, one thing about the tones and fitting in, there's a handful of really cool guitar solos on this record, but not heaps. And I think we were saying a little bit in the break that, each era has got brilliant music and it's got some pretty bad music. But the stuff that survives is the good stuff. I remember in the 90s, a lot of people say there was a vibe that, guitar music's dead or rock is dead or what's happened to the guitar. And we hear this every decade anyway. But I kind of got the idea that if the 80s gave us shredding on absolutely every tune, the lamest pop song had some incredible mind-blowing shredding. I reckon the 90s, especially guys like Tom Dumont, brought such a good focus on really interesting parts and really interesting tones that worked within the context of the tune.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is I don't know. I don't want to say it's more valuable, but that's what I'm tempted to say. It seemed like a more sustainable idea in terms of producing great music.
Yeah, well, it came much later, but James Valentine was very good in Maroon 5 post the first record of how to incorporate guitars into what was predominantly electronic music.
Yeah, right.
How to find
clubbing
things
music,
that fit, you know? Because that first Maroon 5 album was very guitar driven, you know, very loud.
Great album too, actually. That was a killer album.
But then
the
every
first one.
subsequent record, he's kind of disappeared and it's had to find his place. And that sort of might have been influenced from how this album, like I'm just throwing out there off the top of my head, how you managed to fit a guitar into this type of music. And then again, he had to do it after this record as No Doubt became more electronic. Yeah. And he had to find a space for that, you know, Hella Good and all those types of songs that came later. Hey Baby, how do you fit, you know, guitars into those sorts of songs? And
true.
Keep it relevant and not just, I'm just putting guitar in for the sake of it because I'm a guitar player. I think, both those bands did that really well.
Yeah.
Right, so fun facts. Do you want to hear some fun facts?
Give us some fun facts.
Apart from breaking my stride,
like a jingle.
We
need
do.
a jingle
fun facts.
with Rob.
We'll work on that.
All right, so here's a really weird one, but I thought, hey, because it has some relevance to us. The first record that Tony Canal bought with his own money was Men at Work's Business as Usual.
Really?
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool. I thought that was that was super cool. And he later became a huge Prince fan, which I would have liked to have seen him, you know, because Prince had turned over so many bass players. I would love to have seen Tony maybe sit in with Prince at some stage because it seemed like they would have been a really good fit.
Yeah. He's awesome, man. He's awesome on this record.
Yeah.
Yeah, great bass.
So on Tony, he was like a Yamaha user. So I'll just move away from the fun facts for a second and go and pivot back. Pivot, there's a word for the 2020. I'm up on it.
Pivoting back with Rob.
But he used the Yamaha BB 1500, which is still the one he has. But yeah, he's always a Yamaha user. And he went on to Music Man's 5 strings. But that's just a little bit for the bass players out there. So the other fun fact is Gwen Stefani is dyslexic. And she didn't even know until she started to have kids. And I guess she had to help with homework and stuff.
Oh, wow.
But she has an arts degree. So I don't know. Or maybe you don't need to read to get an arts degree. That might explain a few things.
I've got one and no, you don't.
The band. So again, I didn't get time to research this. So this is going to be like complete just freestyling. But the band appeared in cartoon form in a 2001 episode of King of the Hill. So
really?
I'm not sure if a lot of bands appeared in The Simpsons and things like that, but it feels like it might have come a bit later than 2001. But I know they had, the Stones appeared and the Who appeared in Simpsons episodes and stuff. But it was just, I was a big fan of King of the Hill and I couldn't remember it. So that's a cool little fun fact. And their first TV appearance was on Conan, Late Night with Conan O'Brien.
Oh, that was a good show.
You guys want to add anything else to that we might have missed?
I'm just wondering, are these guys, are they still playing at all? I mean, obviously Gwen Stefani's solo career went bonkers.
Yeah.
Went massive. I know they did some odd shows here and there in the midst of that, but are they still...
I think they're pretty much on a permanent hiatus. I did get their last record, which I didn't mind. They had the single Settle Down, which was actually quite an epic tune. That was really good. But yeah, they haven't done anything since then. They toured on the back of that record, but man, she's just huge. Doesn't she do The Voice in America or something? And she's got a clothing line and perfumes and all that kind of stuff. So she's sort of moved away from music in a big way by the looks of things. But, you know, when we come out of this COVID thing, I think we're going to see a lot of those bands come back out because there's just going to be a hunger for this. But it all needs to be over because we're seeing the touring thing fall over in America again now.
Yeah.
With, 170,000 cases a day, tours being cancelled left and right. I think Mammoth, Wolfgang Van Halen, they just had to drop off the Guns N' Roses, their little side tour that they were doing because one of the crew got COVID, and there's a whole bunch of bands that just had to cancel their tours because of people getting it. So they've sort of launched back into it in America, but it looks like it's all just starting to get shut down again. So out of this, I think bands like No Doubt, we'll probably see them again, even though she's probably done all right out of selling her stuff online and probably doesn't need the money. I'd love to see him back out there for the right reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Such a great back catalogue. Like, what about favourite songs outside of this album? Because I love It's My Life and Simple Kind of Life, that intro guitar.
Simple Kind of Life, that's the only one I can think of actually at the moment.
Those open chords, they're just like beautiful sounding lush chords.
I just remember there was that one album that was sort of a bit more electronic, and it was the purple hair phase.
Yeah, was that Cosmic? What was that, Cosmic?
I just remember.
Why can't I remember? That's just... Well, we're all sitting in front of computers, so I'm just going to go...
This is riveting podcast.
Tap, 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 tap. And
Mate, I'll edit this. It'll be super snappy.
So, Return to Saturn. That was the
Return to Saturn.
That's
That was
right.
pink hair.
There were some great songs on that. I remember that. That was another album I've got somewhere, and that's another one I listened to a lot.
And that took 5 years to come out after this because obviously they were on tour, that whole time. And then Rocksteady came out a year after that, and that, took them to the next level as far as pop. They were already pretty big, but with Hey Baby and Hella Good and all her crossover into the hip hop stuff really shot them into a whole nother class, really, as far as things came. Push and Shove was that record that they came out with in 2012. But yeah,
Okay.
I've got that Rocksteady live DVD, and it's crazy good.
Yeah.
Man, they were a force live.
100%.
Absolute force.
Yeah.
Oh, your Ex-Girlfriend. That's the other one. Simple Kind of Life.
Ex-Girlfriend, that bass line in that song.
Oh, that's
Great
it.
songs.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that record. Yeah. That was a killer tune. Yeah.
Well, I reckon we've probably kind of covered this record.
I reckon we have. I reckon it's a great record. Rob, thanks for bringing Tragic Kingdom.
My pleasure. Love you, Gwen.
Thanks, Rob.
Shout out to Gwen.
Yeah, man.
Come back.
And
Hi,
Tom.
Gwen.
We want you back.
Hey,
You're back for good.
thanks so much. Tragic Kingdom, No Doubt. Great record. Thanks for joining us. Gabor, where can people find out more about the wares you are peddling?
Well, I'm usually peddling around on YouTube. So if you want to find me, I have this little YouTube channel called the SuperFunAwesomeHappyTime Pedal Show. All one word, no gaps. We don't do gaps. And yeah, we review guitars and amps and pedals and just general fun internet gear related stuff. So yeah, just look for SuperFunAwesomeHappyTime Pedal Show. All one word.
Cool, man. And Rob, where can people find your stuff?
Well, my main gig is Living in the 70s. So just Facebook Living in the 70s Live, and you'll find, well, we're grounded at the moment, but hopefully by the time this episode hits, we're back out gigging.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay, thanks, fellas. We'll catch you next week for another iconic album.
Thanks, gents. Bye.
All right, thanks for joining us for another Guitar Speak podcast, Iconic Albums. I've really enjoyed putting these conversations together with Rob and Gabor. and it's been a really cool addition to our podcast show, which every week has deep dive one-on-one interviews as well. That's been our bread and butter for the last 5 years, and that will be continuing as well. Thanks to Fretboard Biology for sponsoring today's episode. Check out the links in the show notes. All right, my name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. And in the words of Michael Schenker, German guitarist from UFO, the Scorpions, and MSG,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.